What happens when one of Hollywood's most unpredictable actors sits down with one of daytime television's most outspoken hosts? Well, buckle up, because what started as a routine promotional interview turned into one of the most uncomfortable moments in The View's history. Colin Farrell, known for his raw honesty and refusal to play by Hollywood's rules, found himself in a verbal sparring match with Joy Behar that escalated so quickly, so intensely, that he eventually did something almost no guest has ever done on the show. He walked off. But before we get into how it all fell apart, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling me what you think about celebrities walking off interviews. Now, let's dive into what really happened. The setup seemed innocent enough. Colin Farrell was making the rounds, promoting his latest film, and The View was just another stop on the press tour. He walked onto the set with that characteristic charm, shaking hands with the hosts, flashing that famous smile. The audience applauded warmly. Everything felt normal, routine even. Whoopi Goldberg opened with the usual pleasantries, asking about the new movie, and Colin gave thoughtful, engaging answers. He talked about the character, the director's vision, the challenges of the role. Standard stuff. The other hosts chimed in with questions about his career, his life in Los Angeles, his thoughts on the film industry. For the first several minutes, it was exactly what you would expect from a celebrity interview. But then Joy Behar decided to shift gears. And this is where things started to get interesting. Joy has never been one to shy away from controversial topics, and she clearly had something on her mind. She leaned forward, and you could see in her expression that she was about to go somewhere different. She started asking Colin about his political views, specifically about some comments he had made in a previous interview regarding American politics. Now, Colin had been pretty careful in that earlier interview, mostly just expressing general concerns about divisiveness and the need for more empathy in public discourse. Nothing too inflammatory. But Joy wanted more. She pressed him, asking him to clarify his stance on specific issues, specific politicians. Colin's body language shifted almost immediately. He sat back slightly, and his smile became a bit more fixed, a bit less genuine. He tried to deflect, saying something along the lines of, "I am an actor, not a politician. I make films. I tell stories. I do not think my political opinions are particularly more valuable than anyone else's." It was a diplomatic answer, the kind of response celebrities give when they want to stay out of trouble. But Joy was not having it. She came back at him, suggesting that celebrities have a platform and therefore a responsibility to speak out on important issues. She mentioned other actors who have been vocal about their beliefs, implying that Colin's reluctance to engage was somehow a cop-out. And this is where you could see Colin's demeanor really start to change. His jaw tightened. He took a breath, and then he said something that clearly caught Joy off guard. He said, "With all due respect, Joy, I think there is a difference between having a platform and being obligated to use it the way other people think you should. I am not running for office. I am not trying to be anyone's moral compass. I am just trying to make good work and live my life." The audience gave a mixed reaction, some applause, some murmurs. Joy, to her credit, did not back down. She doubled down actually, saying that staying silent on certain issues is itself a political statement. That neutrality in times of crisis is essentially taking the side of the oppressor. It was a strong statement, and you could feel the tension in the studio ratchet up several notches. Colin shook his head, not in a dismissive way, but in a way that suggested he genuinely disagreed with what she was saying. He leaned forward, looked directly at Joy, and said, "I think that is an incredibly simplistic way of looking at things. Not everyone has to be an activist. Not everyone has to broadcast their beliefs to validate them. Some of us actually believe that our private convictions can be just as meaningful as our public declarations." Joy shot back immediately, asking if he was suggesting that people who do speak out are somehow less genuine, less authentic in their beliefs. Colin raised his hands, almost in frustration, and said, "That is not what I am saying at all. I am saying that demanding everyone perform their politics publicly is exhausting, and frankly, it is authoritarian. You are essentially saying there is only one acceptable way to engage with the world, and if I do not do it your way, I am wrong." Joy's face hardened. She said, "I am not being authoritarian. I am being realistic. When you have millions of people listening to you, you have a responsibility." Colin responded, "No, I have a responsibility to be honest. I do not have a responsibility to agree with you." The other hosts started to interject, trying to smooth things over, trying to steer the conversation back to safer ground. Whoopi made a joke, trying to lighten the mood. But both Colin and Joy were locked in now. You could see it in their eyes. This was no longer just a disagreement, it was becoming something more personal. Joy said, "So you think you can just sit there and say nothing while the world burns?" Colin replied, "I did not say, I do nothing. I said, I do not broadcast everything I do. There is a difference between action and performance." Joy, "Some of us actually care more about the former than the latter." That line landed like a bomb. The studio went quiet for a beat. Joy's expression shifted from combative to genuinely offended. She said, Are you suggesting that I do not care about real action? That I am just performing? Colin hesitated, and you could see him weighing his words carefully. He said, I am suggesting that making every conversation about politics, demanding everyone declare their allegiances publicly, that feels more like performance to me than substance. Joy shook her head, her voice rising slightly, and said, You know what, Colin? I think you are hiding behind this whole privacy thing because you do not want to be held accountable for your views. Colin's face darkened. He said, Accountable to whom? To you, to the audience. I am accountable to myself, to my family, to the people I care about. I do not owe you or anyone else a public confession of my beliefs just so you can feel better about where I stand. Joy fired back, but you are happy to take the money, the fame, the platform that comes with being a celebrity. You cannot have it both ways. Colin said, I am not trying to have it both ways. I am trying to live my life with some degree of integrity and privacy. Those are not mutually exclusive. The conversation was spiraling now, and the other hosts were visibly uncomfortable. Sarah N. tried to jump in with a question about Colin's charity work, clearly trying to redirect, but Joy cut her off. She said, No, I want to hear this. I want to understand why someone with Colin's influence thinks it is okay to just sit on the sidelines. Colin exhaled sharply and said, I never said I sit on the sidelines. You are putting words in my mouth. You are creating a version of me. The atmosphere in the studio had gone from uncomfortable to downright hostile. You could see the other hosts exchanging glances, clearly unsure of how to intervene. Whoopi tried again, her voice calm but firm, saying, Okay, let us take a breath here. But Joy was not finished. She looked at Colin with an expression that mixed frustration and disbelief, and said, You talk about integrity and privacy. But what you are really talking about is privilege. The privilege to opt out of difficult conversations because they make you uncomfortable. Some people do not have that luxury. Colin, some people have to fight every single day just to be heard, just to exist. And for you to sit there and act like staying silent is some noble choice. It is frankly insulting to those people. Colin's eyes narrowed. He took a moment before responding, and when he did, his voice was controlled, but you could hear the anger simmering beneath it. He said, Do not talk to me about privilege as if you know my story. You do not know where I came from. You do not know what I have been through. You do not know what battles I have fought privately, what causes I support, what work I do that I choose not to publicize because I actually believe in doing things without needing a pat on the back for it. You are making assumptions about me based on nothing, and then using those assumptions to paint me as some sort of villain. That is not fair, and it is not accurate. Joy said, Then enlighten me. Tell me about these causes you support. Tell me about this work you do. Colin shook his head and said, Why should I have to prove myself to you? Why should I have to lay out my entire life, my entire belief system, just to satisfy your curiosity or your judgment? This is exactly what I am talking about. This demand for public confession. This idea that if I am not shouting about everything I believe from the rooftops, then it does not count. It is performative nonsense, and I want no part of it. Joy leaned forward, her voice sharp, and said, It is not performative to use your voice when you have one. It is called responsibility. Colin shot back, No, it is called pressure. It is called coercion. It is called being told that unless I conform to your idea of what activism looks like, I am part of the problem. The audience was completely silent now. You could have heard a pin drop. Sarah N. tried once more to redirect, asking something about Colin's upcoming projects. But both Colin and Joy ignored her. They were fully engaged in this battle now, and neither was backing down. Joy said, You keep talking about coercion, but nobody is forcing you to do anything. I am simply asking you to acknowledge that your silence has consequences. Colin said, And I am telling you that you do not get to define what my silence means. You do not get to tell me that my private actions are invalid because they are not public. You do not get to decide that your way of engaging with the world is the only legitimate way. Joy's voice went up again. I am not saying it is the only way. I am saying that when you have a platform like yours, staying silent is a choice, and that choice has meaning. Colin said, Yes, it does. It means I value my privacy. It means I believe in thoughtful action over performative gestures. It means I do not think every aspect of my life needs to be commodified and packaged for public consumption. Joy said, Or it means you are scared. It means you do not want to alienate part of your audience. It means you are protecting your career. Colin's face flushed, and he said, Now you are calling me a coward. Is that where we are? Joy said, I am saying that maybe, just maybe, your commitment to privacy is really a commitment to not rocking the boat. Colin stood up slightly in his chair, his body language shifting dramatically. He said, You do not know me, Joy. You do not know what keeps me up at night. You do not know what I wrestle with. You do not know what kind of person I am, what kind of father I am, what kind of friend I am. All you know is what you see in magazines and on screens. And you have decided based on that incredibly limited information that I am not doing enough, that I am not good enough, that I am somehow failing some moral test that you have appointed yourself the judge of. And I am telling you, with all due respect, that you do not have that right. Nobody does. Joy said, I have the right to ask questions. I have the right to challenge you. Colin said, and I have the right to tell you that your challenges are based on false premises and bad faith assumptions. You are not trying to understand me. You are trying to trap me. You are trying to get me to say something you can use against me, or to force me into a position where I have to defend myself for not being the kind of activist you think I should be. And I am not playing that game. I am done playing that game. Joy said, it is not a game, Colin. This is about accountability. Colin said, no, this is about you trying to assert control over how I live my life and express my beliefs. And I am sorry, but I do not answer to you. The other hosts were now actively trying to intervene. Whoopi said, okay, we need to move on from this. We have other topics to discuss. But Joy was not done. She said, I think what Colin is really saying is that he does not want to be challenged. He does not want to be uncomfortable. He wants to live in his bubble and pretend that the world is not falling apart around him. Colin's jaw clenched, and he said, that is a disgusting mischaracterization of what I am saying, and you know it. Joy said, then what are you saying, Colin? Because from where I am sitting, it sounds like a lot of excuses. Colin said, I am saying that I do not owe you an explanation for how I choose to live my life. I am saying that your standards for what makes someone a good person are arbitrary and self-serving. Joy said, I do not think I have all the answers, but I think I have more courage than someone who hides behind the excuse of privacy every time someone asks them to take a stand. And that line, that implication, it hung in the air like a weapon. Colin went very still. His face was red now, and you could see him breathing heavily. He said, you just questioned my courage. Joy said, I am questioning your choices. Colin said, no, you are questioning my character. You are doing it in front of an audience, on national television, based on nothing but your own sense of moral superiority. Joy said, I am just saying what I see. Colin said, what you see is a version of me that you have invented to make yourself feel righteous. Whoopi stood up now, actually physically stood up, and said, okay, that is enough. We are going to take a break. But Colin held up his hand and said, no, let her finish. Let her say what she really thinks. Joy said, I think you are talented. I think you are successful. And I think you are wasting an opportunity to make a real difference because you are too concerned with protecting yourself. Colin nodded slowly, and then he said something that nobody expected. He said, you know what, Joy? You are right about one thing. I am protecting myself. I am protecting myself from people who think that the only way to be a good person is to perform your goodness publicly, who think that anyone who does not engage exactly the way you do is somehow morally bankrupt. And if that makes me wrong in your eyes, then so be it. The studio erupted. Some audience members gasped, others started murmuring loudly. Joy's face went red. She said, so you are just going to dismiss everything I have said. Colin said, I am going to recognize that this conversation has become something other than productive. I came here to talk about a film. I came here to have a conversation. I did not come here to be put on trial. Joy said, I was not putting you on trial. I was asking legitimate questions. Colin said, no, you were prosecuting me. There is a difference. And I am done being the defendant in a case I never agreed to participate in. Whoopi tried again, louder this time. Okay, we really need to take a commercial break. But Colin was standing now, fully on his feet. He started to remove his microphone. The other hosts were visibly shocked. He said, I think I am done here. Joy said, oh, so you are just going to walk away. You are just going to prove my point. Colin said, no, I am going to remove myself from a situation. The moment Colin disappeared behind the curtain, the studio descended into chaos. The audience was buzzing, voices overlapping, some people standing to get a better view. Whoopi stood there, her hand pressed to her forehead, trying to process what just happened. Sarah N. had her hand over her mouth, eyes wide with shock. Sunny Hostin looked between Joy and the exit, her expression a mixture of disbelief and concern. And Joy sat frozen in her chair, her face flushed, her mouth slightly open, as if she wanted to say something but could not find the words. Whoopi was the first to try to regain control. She looked directly at the camera and said, we are going to take a quick break. We will be right back. The second the cameras cut, the studio exploded. Producers rushed onto the stage. Staff members talked frantically into their headsets, and the audience was fully animated, everyone talking at once. Whoopi turned to Joy and said something the microphones did not pick up, but you could see from her body language that she was not happy. Joy threw her hands up, her voice rising. She said something like, I was just asking questions, to which Whoopi shook her head firmly. Sarah leaned over to Joy, trying to calm her down, but Joy was clearly defensive. She kept gesturing toward the exit where Colin had left, trying to justify what happened, trying to explain her position. But the other hosts were not buying it. This was not just an uncomfortable moment, this was a disaster. This was the kind of moment that would dominate headlines, that would be replayed endlessly on social media. And everyone knew it. When the cameras came back on, Whoopi had composed herself. She addressed the audience directly, saying, as you just saw, Colin Farrell has left the interview. We want to be clear that we respect his decision to step away. The View is a place where we have difficult conversations, where we challenge our guests, but we never want anyone to feel attacked or disrespected. Clearly, this conversation took a turn that none of us anticipated, and we are sorry that it ended the way it did. Joy, however, could not help herself. She jumped in and said, "I want to say that I was not attacking Colin. I was asking him important questions about responsibility and the role of celebrities in our culture. If he felt uncomfortable answering those questions, that is his choice. But I stand by everything I said." The audience had a mixed reaction. Some applauded, clearly agreeing with Joy. Others remained silent, and you could see a few people shaking their heads. Whoopi gave Joy a look that spoke volumes, but she did not contradict her on air. Instead, she steered the conversation toward other topics, trying desperately to move past what had happened. But the damage was done. The rest of the episode felt hollow, awkward. The hosts went through the motions, discussing other news items, taking questions from the audience, but the energy had fundamentally shifted. Every few minutes, someone in the audience would whisper to the person next to them, and you knew exactly what they were talking about. The Colin Farrell walk-off had become the only story that mattered. As soon as the show wrapped, the fallout began. Social media exploded within minutes. Clips of the argument started circulating everywhere. People were taking sides instantly. Some defended Colin, saying he had every right to walk off, that Joy had crossed a line, that she had been needlessly aggressive. They praised him for standing up for himself, for refusing to be bullied into performing his beliefs for public consumption. They called him brave, authentic, someone who was not afraid to push back. Others sided firmly with Joy. They argued that Colin had been evasive, that his insistence on privacy was just a cover for not wanting to take a stand. They said he had been disrespectful, that he had overreacted to legitimate questions. They accused him of being privileged, of not understanding that his silence had real-world consequences. The debate raged on, getting more heated by the hour, with both sides convinced they were absolutely right. Media outlets picked up the story immediately. Entertainment news shows devoted entire segments to analyzing the confrontation. Body language experts weighed in. Communication specialists debated whether Joy had been too aggressive or whether Colin had been too sensitive. Political commentators used the incident to discuss larger issues about celebrity activism, cancel culture, and the pressure on public figures to take political stances. Everyone had an opinion. Joy doubled down in the days that followed. In interviews and on social media, she maintained that she had done nothing wrong, that she had simply asked questions that needed to be asked. She framed Colin's walk-off as evidence that he could not handle being challenged. She positioned herself as someone willing to ask the hard questions, even when it made people uncomfortable. Her supporters rallied around this narrative, praising her for not backing down. Colin, for his part, remained largely silent.